Hey everyone, today is an important episode of BioLogic Science News. I want to discuss microplastics and the problem that microplastics pose to the health of the world's ecosystems. I want to talk about this because CBS recently published an article saying that scientists have declared glitter to be a global health hazard and that glitter should be banned. The article cites Dr. Tricia Farrelly, a professor at New Zealand's Massey University, who says that glitter should be banned because it's a microplastic. The article also cites Professor Richard Thompson, who published a study suggesting that up to a third of all the fish caught in the United Kingdom had microplastics in their bodies. These microplastics are defined as being small pieces of plastic smaller than 5 millimeters. These tiny pieces of plastic are often produced when a larger piece of plastic is degraded or damaged. The outer layer is scraped or cut off, and the pieces can get washed away in the rain, chewed up by animals, and ground down into plastic dust by rocks and erosion. A lot of the microplastics produced by this mechanical degradation come from clothing made of plastic textiles that gets frayed or scraped or ripped, and vehicle tires which create brake dust, and pieces of paint that flake or chip off of buildings or vehicles. These sources of degradation don't account for all microplastics. A great number of them are deliberately manufactured for use in consumer goods. It's shocking how many products use microplastics, especially when biodegradable alternatives exist in almost every circumstance. Little polyethylene microbeads are added to toothpastes as an abrasive. They're used heavily in cosmetic products like skin cleaners, shampoos, body washes, and exfoliating scrubs. Perhaps the worst use of microbeads is their use in air blasting tech. It's used to clean paint off of large vehicles and buildings. Particles of acrylic or polyester are propelled with a continuous streaming blast of air, and their abrasion against the paint or the wallpaper or whatever is enough to break it up, strip it off. Besides producing just a huge amount of microplastic contamination, these microplastic particles will also scrape against the metal of the vehicle that they're being sprayed against, and they'll pick up traces of heavy metal particles like lead or cadmium, and these heavy metals get carried with the microplastics into the environment. Microplastics enter the environment in areas with heavy plastic pollution. Think places like freeways and highways with all the brake dust, or tropical and subtropical coastlines that are trampled by tourists, or in the sewage where all the cosmetics and shampoos get flushed, or where a water treatment plant dumps its waste. The microplastics are often too small for the water treatment plants to pick up, and they stay in the otherwise clean water. Once the microplastics have made their way out into the wild, they don't degrade. It takes mechanical forces to physically break them apart, because there's only a handful of bacterial species who've only recently evolved a limited capacity to break down the synthetic plastic polymers. In many cases, these microplastics are ingested by animals, and because they can't be digested, the microplastics accumulate in their tissues. Dead animals have been found with their stomachs full of microplastics. They ate them thinking it was food, but they couldn't digest the plastic and derive any nutrients from it, so they remained hungry and they kept eating until there was literally no more room in their stomach for actual food. By consuming a diet mostly or entirely composed of microplastics, the animals can actually eat themselves into an early death through starvation. Microplastic residues and buildups have been observed in the tissues of crabs, prawns, and lobsters. They've been seen clogging the gills of fish and in the respiratory systems of amphibians, and they've even been seen in the tissues of corals. The corals can get coated with microplastics, like a glazed donut dipped in sprinkles. And in response, the coral has to secrete a nutritionally expensive mucus in an attempt to wash off the microplastics. And it sucks for the coral because if they spend all these nutrients producing this mucus to wash all the microplastics off of themselves, and then the moment they're done, more microplastics just come and get stuck to them again, what are they going to do? They can't keep doing this forever. Metabolically, it's going to drive them to death. Even microscopic animals like zooplankton aren't immune, as the scents that they use to hunt and eat phytoplankton are the same scents that get emitted by microplastics. Apparently, these plastics, like low and high-density polyethylene, polypropylene, and several other plastics typically used in consumer goods, like plastic bags and Tupperware, apparently these plastics smell exactly like food to the zooplankton, and as a result, microplastics have been found in their feces, in their bodies, and coating their limbs, just like they stick to corals. All of these animals, like zooplankton and fish and crustaceans, are all eaten by larger organisms. By ingesting their bodies, the larger organism consumes all of the microplastics in the smaller organism, and by digesting their body, they get all of those microplastics clogged up in their own tissues, in their stomach and intestines and stuff. It can take up to 9 times as long as regular food for these microplastics to pass through the digestive system. As if that wasn't bad enough, the microplastics tend to absorb heavy metals and pollutants, and these contaminants will get accumulated and passed up the food chain into the bodies of all the carnivorous animals, including us, including humans. Unfortunately, not much is known about the full extent of microplastic contamination in humans. Because of these destructive ecological effects, scientists are increasingly worried and increasingly calling for more regulation and bans on microplastics. Glitter is a particularly bad problem. It's a particularly egregious offender. Glitter is a microplastic that's industrially produced by the ton, and it gets shipped all over the planet to be used mostly by children making arts and crafts. The glitter often gets spilled, the teacher has to come by and clean it up, and messy art projects, dripping with glitter, somehow always end up in the garbage. All of this trashed glitter goes into landfills and sewers, where it enters the environment and contaminates pretty much everything. Is glitter really worth it? I say no, it's not. It's clearly not worth it. The scientists calling for a ban don't think so either. We cannot sustain a mindless, pointless kind of consumerism with no regard to how it impacts the biological world around us.